Welcome to Employment Law This Week. I'm George Whipple. Here in the United States, it seems like restrictive covenants are scrutinized from almost every angle. But where do they stand around the world? That's the topic of this week's Spilling Secrets, Epstein Becker Green's podcast series about trade secrets and non-compete law. Today, we have some highlights. If you'd like more details, you can listen to the full Spilling Secrets podcast episode. The discussion begins in Europe, where the concept of garden leave is a common alternative or companion to non-compete and non-solicit agreements. The garden leave, which originated in the UK, requires advance notice before an employee quits. During this time, the employee remains on the payroll, but stops working for the company, spending the time at home in their garden instead. Andrew Lilley, who set up the employment law arm for Deloitte Legal in the UK, says that garden leave agreements are a generally accepted form of restrictive covenant across the pond.
The UK courts are much more tolerant of garden leave than they are of non-competes. After all, you're still being paid. They see far less hardship than if you're actually unable to continue your own profession and not being paid anything either. And from the business's perspective, compared with some lump sum settlement payment, garden leave has the cash flow attraction of spreading the cost.
Epstein Becker Green's Susan Gross Sholinsky has seen an increase in the use of garden leaves here in the United States.
I think people are a little bit more apt to consider it now that they know that non-competes are under attack a little bit. I've also seen sort of a combo doing a notice period / garden leave for the first few months and then a little bit more of a non-compete.
I think we all agree about the potential utility of garden leave clauses in the U.S., but now I like to move the conversation away from the U.S. and the U.K. No one should take what we're about to say as definitive advice on a given country, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear a survey of non-compete law around the world.
Employers in Hong Kong generally do rely on garden leaves, much like the UK, but non-competes are likely not to be upheld in Hong Kong or Singapore. In many other parts of Asia, non-competes are generally permissible, as well as in the Middle East, with one notable exception.
Post-employment non-competes are pretty difficult to enforce in Israel unless the employee is using trade secrets of the employer invested unique time or resources in connection with training that particular employee, or where the employee is paid during that non-compete period.
Turning to Africa, there are several countries, such as Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, where non-competes and non-solicits are generally permissible. But that's not often the case just south of us.
In Central and South America, it can evidently be a bit tricky because the constitutions of many of the countries there recognize a freedom of work right that is arguably incompatible with restrictive covenants.
The panelists agree that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to restrictive covenants from multinational employers. But there are definitely key points to keep in mind. Multinational employers frequently structure restrictive covenants around the rules of the country where the contracts are drawn up. Many employers also preemptively try to avoid non-compete litigation by ensuring that customer relationships are linked to more than one person. Subscribe to the Employment Law This Week feed wherever you get your podcasts to hear the full audio episode and to catch all future editions of the Spilling Secrets series. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.